they were like, is that really how it happened? I'm like, yes, that's really how it happened. A lot of times I think when you see a film that's kind of a true story, you're like, yeah, kind of true. There's pieces of it, but really, Phil and Kay have been so honest about their story their whole life. So we've heard these stories over and over again, and we're able to just really let them come to life on the screen.
Willie and Korie Robertson, it's great to have you here on Charisma News. And we're going to be talking about this wonderful film that's a true to life story about Willie, your father, Phil Robertson, who everybody kind of probably knows you guys best from Duck Dynasty, but there is a lot that happened before those cameras were on. And so I got the chance to see this movie, The Blind, which is a Fathom event, and we're going to encourage people to go check that out. The link for that will be in the description and in the article. But I want to hear about your heart for this movie and your experience with bringing this story to life of Phil Robertson.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably going to be thought of as a story about my dad, Phil, but it's probably more about Kay, my mother, and really her resiliency to turn, something really bad into good, forgiving my dad, but certainly Dad having that major life change. And I think you don't, if you appreciate Duck Dynasty and all the shows it made, everything that's come out of that, you need to look at the beginning to see that it almost didn't happen. His family almost fell apart. It was that close. And so, we go back, and I think it was tough for Mom and Dad to show that time of their life. It was kind of and in Christianity, we like to forget the past and move on, and sins are forgiven. And I think that's tough when you go back and make a movie about the darkest time of your life. But they were willing to do that to make sure that if anybody else is in that position they're in, that they have a chance and realize there's hope, there's redemption, there can be change through changing their life for the gospel.
Amen. Yeah. And I definitely agree that this movie is so much about your mother, Miss Kay. I mean, I just was blown away by, the actresses that portrayed her did a phenomenal job of just showing unconditional love. And I love the scenes where your dad and Mom's first start dating, and how she just humbly says, basically, I'm gonna come and see your family and help around there. And I just was like, wow, Miss Kay was an amazing woman going all the way back there. So, Willie, what was it like growing up with her?
Mom was always fun. For most of the worst parts of the movie where they weren't believers, I don't have any memory of that. So most of my memories are all when they were believers, and they had, the marriage was good and things were happy. And Mom was always funny. I think she's kind of where I always thought about where I got most of my funny side was from Mom. This is the way she, and I'm sure it's probably just a mechanism she had to develop, to deal with not just what they come out of, but we were poor. We didn't have any money. She was always trying to manage everything and pay the bills and raise 4 boys, which was difficult in a 2-bedroom house down there on the river. And we were pretty rough and tumble boys. So she was great. I mean, just always the solid piece of our family that you could always depend on.
Yeah. And Korie, Miss Kay is your mother-in-law. And so could you just talk about the relationship that you guys have as well?
Yeah. It was neat because we put that scene in there where Kay comes over and cooks with Phil's mom. And that's kind of the beginning of her learning to cook. And she had a grandmother she called Nanny that helped her learn to cook too. But that's a big part of who she is. She cooks for the family, takes care of everybody. And when I first came into the family, I definitely saw the heroic nature of Kay. So loved that we got to show that in the film, because she really did. She really held the film together in a time. She was a single mom, which you see in the film. Yeah. There was a moment where she was a single mom of 3 boys and had to just get out there and get a job and take care of the family. And she did that. And, we run a family business called Duck Commander, and that they ran that whenever I first came into the family. And I said, Kay single-handedly ran that business off the end of her couch. Like she'd be sitting there on the couch and all her papers all around. And she really has been a, part of every single aspect of the business, but even more than that, their family and held the family together in the good times and the bad.
Yeah. The whole concept of hunting being such hunting and being outside is such a big deal for your family. My favorite scene, or one of my favorite scenes, was when Phil turns down his friends who he had been running with, and he wakes up his sons, Jace and Alan, to go hunting with him. Willie, there's like a rite of passage with going hunting with your dad. What was it like for you to have that first time going hunting with your dad?
It was neat. That's a great scene on the movie. And that's where you can see Phil's whole mentality and spirit changing from where it was just all about him. Now he's got to realize he's got to think about this family, that he has and creating that. And yeah, I think that's big. It's huge for us. It was always a little different because it wasn't just a hobby. It was kind of business as well. And so Dad had melded what he wanted to do with his passion and in a job as well. And so we were going out there, and he was always, working on the call. And once we start video, and that created a whole new thing where, we were videoing what we were doing, and all that mattered, all that put together. I think even in the movie before when Phil gets the idea kind of for the duck call and gets his life straightened out, but all of that stuff, putting together the videos we made and all that was so helpful, really in coming with the show, because then now we were used to cameras and all that, and then ultimately back to where Korie and I and my cousin put the movie together. And so so it's amazing how God worked through all that, just taught us just enough at the right time to put this thing together.
Yeah. So you put this thing together. And so I want to talk about that because, you had the series Duck Dynasty, which, it kind of did its few seasons, which my goodness, I loved that show. And honestly, one thing that really surprised me about the film is seeing young Cy being the voice of reason in a lot of cases. The actors that you had playing him, I felt like did a great job. I'm like, I could absolutely see that becoming Cy that we know and love. And I think they probably had a lot of fun bringing those younger versions of Cy to life. But just talk about the making of this film. You've had cameras in front of you guys for a number of years, but why movie cameras and why now?
Well, making a film is a whole new thing than what we did with Duck Dynasty. And so we learned so much along the way. And, it's a little bit intimidating to be like the first film that you make is your family story because, you cannot get that wrong. It has to be right. But also it was awesome to get to be the ones to tell our family story and really be involved in every single aspect. We were on set most days. We were involved with the editing and every single piece of it. So it really came out so true. And it's been fun because even when we showed our kids, the first time we showed our kids, there were a few scenes that they didn't know. They hadn't heard that story. She was like, they were like, is that really how it happened? We're like, yes, that's really how it happened. A lot of times I think when you see a film that's kind of a true story, you're like, yeah, kind of true. There's pieces of it, but really... Phil and Kay have been so honest about their story their whole life. So we've heard these stories over and over again, and we're able to just really let them come to life on the screen.
Yeah. Your faith is so evident in everything that you do. And I really appreciate that you guys have never been ashamed to share your faith and be real Christians. Everything from the podcast to the TV show to, even your daughter is speaking all over the place. And you guys are a family that really loves the Lord. But I know that had to start somewhere personally for both of you. And yes, you grew up in a Christian family. I'm grateful that Willie, you kind of came along as the transition happened, so you didn't have to go through all those bad things. But you had to come to a decision on yourself. Could you tell us about both of you guys? Tell us about your own decisions to follow Christ.
For me, it was growing up. It was growing up in the church, and I'd made that decision early in life. That's what I wanted to do, and then I think faith is a journey. You learn so much. I know so much more now than I knew even when I took that initial step. And one of the things I wanted to do was always share my faith, and I've had a passion for that. Really, a calling to share my faith and put it out there. And one of the biggest influence was Phil, because I saw him sharing his faith with charisma, that he was really putting it out there. And it was just every day, all week. It was so authentic and it was real. It wasn't just at a church building. Most of the time it was outside of a church building. And so, just learned that and picked that up, and that fire hasn't left, and, there's been ups and downs and, all through life, I think, like we have, but that's, for me, I love watching that beginning and that start of faith. And so I've been able to take the message of the movie, The Blonde, and also Mom and Dad, especially Phil, and I can put that over. And I've told that to thousands and thousands of people to find themselves somewhere in that story, and they may be like Phil, where they have to move and get away from friends and influences and just, change their life. But there's also other people in that story, that probably, like Mom, who had to forgive. If she doesn't forgive, they don't stay together. My life looks completely different. The preacher who goes up and goes to the bar, and to do that. And so, I always challenge people, there may be somebody you need to go see, there's somebody you're thinking there's no way, their life is finished, there's nothing good can come out of it, but you may need to get in your car and go see them, so there's all kind of, people, but I love that front lines aspect of sharing the gospel.
Yeah. What about you, Korie?
Well, for me, I just was really blessed to grow up with the legacy of faith. My grandparents and parents just had a strong faith and passed that on to me. So I also grew up in it. But I remember, so Willie and his family actually came to our church in high school. Willie was middle school. I was middle school. Started to come to our church and were part of our youth group. And our youth group was on fire. It was so fun to be a part of. And so we really got a blessing of that from a young age, kind of dug those roots really deep. And so, like Willie said, times come as you grow and you change, but we did both have those deep roots of faith that was passed on to both of us from our families, and preferably we pass those on to our kids as well.
Well, from what I've seen, you guys have definitely passed it on to your family, and I'm loving seeing the legacy of the Robertsons, how God has realigned that and gotten it back on course. And Willie, you talked about how you just love sharing the gospel and telling people about Jesus. And that's something that you've learned from your father. And I love how in this film, and I don't want to give away too much because I want everybody to go see it, theblindmovie.com, to get your tickets and get, find out where it's playing around you. Go and take a friend, because you will see a life that has been truly changed. And in this movie, you have Phil and Big Al. And Big Al really was a bad dude for your dad, but God turned that situation around, and that made me cry. That really did. And I thought maybe that was something you guys just kind of wrote in to kind of tell the story, but to know that actually happened. Can you tell us a little bit about that and some of the redemption with that relationship as well?
Yeah, I think Big Al was a big influence on Phil. And I think they were, in the world, they were buddies. And I think Big Al kind of showed Phil the ropes of the world, if you will, and, got into trouble. And but actually had a little bit better handle. I guess he was better at being in the world and staying worldly without, everything collapsing. Phil kind of, once he got in there and went all the way, and then Phil's life starts falling apart and he loses his job and he can't, all these things are happening, and the marriage breaks apart. And so once he comes back and he had to get away from those influences, which is why we moved to Louisiana. But then the change was noticeable. And so Phil had this desperation to go preach the gospel, especially to Big Al. And once they had seen Phil's life change authentically and for real, then there was a lot of questions. And I think those are the opportunities where we can share. It's like, what happened to you? They talked. And then once Big Al realized, he had health problems and all that, and a lot of times that's what'll circle people back around, to being that way. And so, it was a joy, I know, for Phil to be able to share that with him and see his good friend who they had done so much bad together, and then him give his life to the Lord.
Yeah. There's so many fun scenes in the movie as well. I mean, there's a lot of serious things, but one of my favorite scenes as well that made me chuckle at the beginning. Now, I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler fan because I'm originally from Pittsburgh. So the whole thing with Terry Bradshaw going to the special fishing spot, that was pretty funny to me. So if you're a Pittsburgh Steeler fan or love Terry Bradshaw, that aspect of it made me chuckle. So,
and that's another true story there. Actually, Terry writes about that in his book and tells that story in one of his books. So
Terry told me that story when I was about 12 years old. He had come to Monroe, Louisiana to sign autographs, and Mom went up there, and I got to meet him, and he stopped me. He said, "Let me tell you the story about your dad," and he told me that story.
Wow.
Exactly like we played it. In fact, the story, the movie, there's not as much funny as we wanted in it. And sadly, because of that time, there just wasn't a lot of funny moments. It's not like Duck Dynasty, but it's so real. In fact, sometimes we were like, this is not even going to be believable, but it's so real. It's really how, it was what happened, or the stories that everybody told of what happened. So it's pretty true to exactly, how that story went.
And if you'll notice in that, there's so Phil calls him the blonde bomber.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an interview that we found on YouTube where, Terry talks about that Phil gave him that nickname. He's the one who gave him that nickname. So lots of fun little nuggets in there.
Yeah, definitely. But one of the things that I appreciated at the end was that there was an actual clear presentation of the gospel. And it was so relational that I think anybody can invite their friend to go see this film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Buy a ticket, bring a friend, and go see this, because you will see a life that has been changed. And then you'll see an honest presentation by the real Phil himself. As we're wrapping up here, what is your dad thinking about this film?
I think he is, I think he's proud of it, especially at the end, like you mentioned, because we do get the gospel out. That was the whole point, is to show the movie and then say, this is what changed it, and have that message. Phil is not into talking about his past. He doesn't give his testimony and walk through like a lot of people do. He says, yeah, I was a heathen, but now, and he really just focuses on the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the key. And I think you're right. I think it's a perfect opportunity. If someone doesn't feel like you can share the gospel with someone great, or maybe you don't know the scriptures, and maybe, you're like, man, I want them to, obey the gospel, but I'm not sure I'm the one to do it. This is a perfect thing to show them. And then that way you can answer the questions that they have, or that spins out of it, comes out of it. So it's a great tool, I think, for someone to use to show. I think, Korie and I have always been like that. We're like, oh, we want one of our kids to see a movie like this, or this show, or this podcast, or whatever. And so it would be great. It's a great way to do it, that you don't have to really get in their face about it. You can just say, hey, let's watch this and talk about it.
Yeah. As we're wrapping up here, I just want to encourage everybody to go to theblindmovie.com to get all that information. And I'm going to give you guys the last word to invite people to come to see this film.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about that, one of the things we learned through Duck Dynasty was the power of entertainment to really change people and move people. As our show came out, we had this little prayer at the end, and we've had, I can't even tell you, thousands of people come up to us and say, because of that prayer, our family sits around the table and prays together. Or because of that prayer, our family now, my husband goes to church with me again because he saw real men who love God and can be real men, So we really saw that with our show and how it impacts people. And so that's our prayer for this film, is that, people will come and they will see it and they'll learn about our story, but really that they will learn about God's story and the way he changes life. And whenever Jesus comes into your life, everything changes. There's a theme that we feel like this film shows, and it's that nobody's too far gone. Like no one's too far gone for the gospel of Jesus. And so we hope that people will show up and like you said, bring a friend and tell people about it, because I think it has real power through the gospel to change people's lives.
Amen. Amen. So faith, family, and ducks in that order is something that you guys do to kind of encapsulate your family values. And this definitely shows off the faith and the family. aspect of it, and a little bit of ducks in there too, as that's so important. But thank you guys so much for making this film and for getting this incredible testimony out there, because it will change a lot of people's lives. Go to theblindmovie.com for more information.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
From 1975, Charisma has been at the forefront of reporting on revival, miracles, and the move of God in our world. Charisma Magazine is now going exclusively online to reach beyond the physical barriers of a print issue. Charisma Magazine Online is committed to bringing you the very best spirit-led content to inspire your walk with God in this upside-down world. Go to mycharisma.com for exclusive content today.